So right now, Europe is faced with their third wave and new lockdowns are imposed, and there's a shortage of vaccine out there. And so they're dealing with something altogether different than California. And right now, here in California, we're dealing with a recall of a governor because of the lockdowns that were imposed when there was higher numbers of deaths and there were higher numbers of infections that were going on, or at least higher numbers of people that were going to the ER or hospital or in the ICU rather for coronavirus cases. And so what I have learned is that Dr. Fauci is saying that it's inevitable or it's more than likely that we will end up seeing another surge. And this pretty much tells the story about that because you have not only one place in Europe, but you have several people that have basically who have experience with this virus have basically said, do not put down your guard and do not expect to not be wearing masks and take back all the mandates of let's take the mask off, let's act as if there were no pandemic, although that I believe more than 5 or 6 states have done that, Texas being one of them. And there are some people that even with all of what has happened here in the U.S. still see this as not being real. So this is but one of many articles that was pretty alarming to me because I don't think people want to even look at this because they're just happy to receive that 2 trillion is it $2 trillion stimulus relief package where the Biden administration has basically gave a bump to unemployment and to COVID relief, rent relief, and then people who have gotten a bump in stimulus checks. And with the IRS, they've also filed income tax and they've gotten money through that. And so, despite all of the yay and hoorah and hoopla over these places like Disneyland and theme parks being open, you still have protocols in place where you might have to still wear a mask and you might have to still stand somewhat apart, be cautious about, crowding or gathering together too many people. But I believe a lot of the reason why things are opening up, if any, is because Gavin Newsom, he has been put under so much pressure of losing his office seat as governor. And so here, this article is basically talking about what's going on the outside of California. Europe is facing their third wave and new lockdowns have been imposed amid a shortage of vaccines. So this is going on right now in Rome. And so coronavirus vaccination efforts across Europe are lagging behind, while ours has ramped up, of course, because the Biden administration has made sure to open up more opportunity for more people to get the vaccine. But what I've been hearing is that we don't know how long the vaccine is going to work. And we don't know how long that you're going to be able to have some level of protection and go back to work and do things with some level of normalcy, not full normalcy, but some. And how long is that going to be? So I've heard 6 months, and I've heard 3 months, I've heard 6 months, and then I've heard some people have still end up catching COVID with having both shots. vaccine, Moderna, Pfizer. Um, so there are variants, one from South Africa, one from Brazil, and one from the UK. And what I've heard is that they're more deadlier. And so Rome, as we see it, has already went back into lockdown on their third wave. And this is the fear that I don't think people, or the thing that people dread of hearing. We just saw, if those of you have been paying attention, there have been business owners, there have been right wing groups that have been rising up that are trying to recall Gavin Newsom. They claim it's Democrats. There have been some Democrats that have been recalling Newsom, but that's not all of the Democrats. Let me explain that. So be aware that I believe a lot of this too is possibly hijacked from the right wing extremists. And so, coronavirus vaccinations efforts across Europe are lagging significantly behind the US. And with the number of the new COVID cases in some countries spiking, governments are making the difficult decision to impose the new lockdowns. Italy is become the first nation to impose lockdowns, nationwide coronavirus lockdowns. This was a year ago. Italians came to their windows to sing songs and play instruments in solidarity to one another, but as the country is gripped by the third wave of infection, CBS News correspondent Chris Livesay says the music has now stopped. It is not fun and games. It is not, let's pick up our instruments and sing along and yay and nay or whatever. So he says it seems like only yesterday, but he regained the freedom to sit outside at a cafe and order a cappuccino. So now cities across Italy are locking back down again as the numbers of both the new cases and deaths recorded daily climb, starting all over again. And so this is the thing that I know people don't want to hear, especially in California, when our numbers have dipped and we're looking at reopening or getting some level of normalcy or hope that maybe we can overcome this. So Germany too is facing the prospect of widespread lockdowns as well. So we've got Italy, we've got Germany, and so the lockdowns may be being extended to up to about a month as infections are starting to rise. So new, more infectious variants, and they're going to talk about this, of the virus and a shortage of vaccine doses are making matters a lot worse, according to the Italy's deputy health ministers. Pier Paolo Celeri, so I may not have pronounced that correctly, sorry for that. So we have less than 50% of the expected doses at the present time, but I think the same has happened everywhere in Europe. Celeri told CBS News. So it is not an Italian problem. I think it's a European problem. And so vaccine shortages have been the only European problem. So they've had shortages in their vaccines. So that has kind of caused that. People have been letting their guard down. That sounds like the U.S. with what's about to happen because of this recall business. Because they're opening things back up, I feel, not with care, but with a hastiness because of the pressure they're getting from these right wing extremists. So people have been letting their guard down too. And the director of the U.S. Center for Disease Control Prevention cited Europe as an example this week, warning Americans not to do the same, which they have. And they will, because we're too hell-bent on our businesses and our money. When you have people here in America, in California, who are one paycheck, maybe less. Now, since the virus, they're not even one paycheck away. They've lost jobs. They're 1 foot away from eviction or being homeless. And so now we have these rent relief programs, which that's only going to pay us maybe a fraction of your back rent. It's not going to cover everything. And then lo and behold, if you're one of those people who was adamant about not paying anything, and you didn't, or let's say you're put in a position where you didn't have any money and you couldn't pay anything, now you're in the hot seat because you don't have a lot of debt, but you just have some debt. Okay, I guess some people will look at that as, well, it's better than having a lot of debt. A little bit of debt is better than having a lot of debt. A lot of debt. So I don't think that's a good mix, especially if you're looking at the door and you're possibly going to be outdoors and you don't know where your next move is going to be. So they simply took their eye off the ball. CDC Dr. Rochelle Walensky said, "So I'm pleading with you for the sake of our nation's health. These should be warning signs to all of us. So to make matters worse, Italy can't currently even use the vaccine. It has the most ready supply of. So it joined the list a week of the countries most in Europe temporarily suspending use of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which that it'll tell you here, and reports of patients dying of blood clots shortly after getting this shot. So they had a vaccine, and some patients died of blood clots from getting it. And so we have hesitancy of still with some people not wanting to get vaccine because they're afraid that something like this could happen. So a view of the empty vaccination hubs in their area shopping mall, Frecciarosa, I believe that's what it's called, and Brescia, Italy. This was March 16th, so it looks like a ghost town. And so Italy's national medicines authorities, along with the Pan-European Medicine Agency, the World Health Organization, and British regulators have all said that there is no evidence yet. And they've been saying that about vaccines, but you know, everybody's body's different. So vaccine, they say they don't have evidence that it has caused the blood clots, but which number fewer than 40 among the 17 million people have received the shot in Europe. Okay, so wow, that's crazy. But the WHO reiterated on Wednesday that it was reviewing data, but they always say they're reviewing data. At this time, the WHO considers that the benefits of Astra vaccine outweighs the risks of and recommends that vaccinations do continue. So they're basically saying, I'd rather take a risk. What they're saying, people would rather take a risk on getting vaccinated than take a risk on these variants that are a lot much more deadlier than the first variant that first came out way back in 2019, 2020. And so the Italian regulator has made it clear that the halt is strictly a temporary precaution because they're still doing the data, trying to see if everything is okay before they give the green light to start vaccination again, because they are dealing with an even deadlier strain of COVID. So, like the EU nations, Italy may decide to reevaluate later this week when the European Medicine Agency releases revised guidance after a review of the data of AstraZeneca vaccinations, but with some vaccination centers around the country left empty this week due to the decision, it has been just the latest setback in a country that already suffered so much during this pandemic, and they are not the only ones, of course. We can't take much more of this. So, one Rome resident told CBS News on Wednesday, okay, all right, as his country suffers through its deepest recession since World War II. More than 100,000 deaths have already been blamed on coronavirus in Italy, and the country's military has gone from trucking away the dead to inoculating the living. Um, and so, if only the health ministry says that there has or was enough to go around. So, since the dawn of the pandemic, things that happened in Italy have had an eerie way of repeating themselves in the U.S. as well. So this is one to think about, you guys, before you start getting your happy hats together and being excited that they're opening some things up. Let this be a lesson and a warning as well, is what they're saying basically, as Italy grapples with the third wave of a vaccine shortage. However, the health ministry told Live Say that Americans should be grateful for the inoculation program rapid rollout at home as well. So this basically is showing how Italy is in lockdown. So if you don't know, now you know right here. You can see it. It says Italy enters fresh lockdown, shutting down shops and schools and hospitals. All the things that people are mad at Gavin Newsom for doing early on in the pandemic, and what he should have done, or at least early enough that he could, because Trump didn't do it. You know, and he wanted things to reopen because they're more about the money, and they're more about the people who can, basically, stay afloat a little longer than those who are just basically living on kibbles and bits. So virus variants found to be deadlier, more contagious. Some may thwart vaccines, of course, because they're afraid, or because, like what I said, they're afraid the vaccine might have something in it that could kill them, or they're afraid that maybe the vaccines don't even really work. And, which one do you want to do? It's a lot of confusion. So this is by Nancy Lapid. And so this is out of Reuters. The following is a roundup of some of the latest scientific studies of the novel coronavirus, efforts to find treatments for vaccines for COVID-19 and the illness that has caused the virus. Multiple variants can escape vaccines. So this is not news that we want to hear, but going on, antibodies induced by Moderna Inc. and Pfizer Inc. BioNTech SE vaccines are dramatically less effective at neutralizing some of the most worrying coronavirus variants, and new studies suggest. So researchers obtained blood samples by 99 individuals who had received 1 or 2 doses of the vaccine and tested their vaccine-induced antibodies against virus replicas engineered to mimic 10 globally circulating variants. 5 of the 10 were highly resistant to the neutralization, even when volunteers had received both doses of vaccines. So the researcher reported this on Friday in a Cell. All 5 highly resistant vaccines had mutations, and so in the spike of the virus surface known as K417NTE484K and N501Y, they characterize a variant of rampant in that is rampant in South Africa, and 2 variants spreading rapidly in Brazil. And in keeping with that, it also goes on to say that previous studies proportion of neutralizing antibodies dropped from 5 to 6-fold against the variants discovered in Brazil. Against the variant discovered in South Africa, neutralizing fell 20 to 44-fold. So a variant circulating now in New York, E484K mutation is what it is called. While studies in New York variant are ongoing, our findings suggest a similar variant harboring E484K. So these are different variants or different strains of the virus. They have letters and numbers to them to let the scientists or the people that are working, like epidemiologists, know which ones are which and from where they originate from. They're harder for the vaccine-induced antibodies to neutralize than basically kill the variant various strains. That's basically what that means. Says a study leader Alejandro Balaz of Harvard University, Massachusetts General Hospital. So despite our results, he added, it's important to consider that vaccines raise other kinds of immune responses which could protect against developing severe diseases. So that's the thing they're looking at. It may not, well, the way I see it now, This is my opinion, and I'll say that to not put this on these people who are doing this, is that if you get the vaccine, there's a higher chance that you will stay out of the hospital or you won't develop the severe diseases, um, because you develop some type of immune response to these viruses versus someone who doesn't get any vaccination against it. You're more susceptible to ending up in the ICU, is what it's looking like here. So, variant identified in the UK is a lot deadlier now. So, coronavirus variant identified in the UK is known as the B.1.1.7. It's deadlier than the other variants circulating, so a new study appears to confirm this. Researchers analyzed this variant, or this strain, on data 184,786 people in England diagnosed with COVID-19 between mid-November and January, including 867 who had died. For every 3 people who died within 4 weeks after being infected with another variant, roughly 5 died after becoming infected by this B.1.1.7 variant. And so, according to a paper posted on Med, I was going to say MD, but Med RXIV, and this is ahead of a peer review. So overall, the risk of death of B.1.1.7 was 67% higher than the risk of other variants in England, authors have said. So this one is a really deadly strain of this COVID. So as with the earlier variants, patients' risk of death increased with age, male gender, pre-existing medical conditions as well. And so B.1.1 is now prevalent across Europe. And so that is why they're on this strict lockdown that I just basically read to you about Italy. So they are taking it serious because they saw firsthand what this can do. And now they are approaching something even more deadlier. So, and it's predicted to become prevalent in the US as well. I didn't want to say that, but this is what it's saying. Crucially, the research wrote, emerging data suggests that the currently approved vaccines SARS-CoV-2 are effective against the B.1.1.7. So that's the good news. So, variant identified in Brazil is doubly infectious. The one in Brazil is doubly infectious. Between November and January in Manaus, Brazil, the frequency of COVID-19 cases involving P1 coronavirus variant increased from non-existent to 73%. So the number of the infections had quadrupled compared to that of the city experiencing the first wave in the pandemic, according to a report posted on MedR XIV, probably a Roman numeral, I'm supposing, and ahead of the peer review. And so the greater infectiousness of the P1 variant likely contribute to that of the report suggesting. So based on national health surveillance data, the authors estimate P1 variant is roughly 2.5 times more transmissible than the previous variant circulating in Manus. So the spread of this one, P1, occurred despite the fact that 68% of the city's population had already been infected by an original strain of coronavirus. So the research noted this. So in the analysis, the risk of reinfection of this P1 was low. So the ability of the variant to cause severe disease or the pathogenesis, okay, so, or its pathogenicity. So, genicity is still unclear. Okay, I may not even said that right, tongue tied or tongue lazy. So, the P1 variant, in other words, it was low, but this already had been detected in at least 25 countries. So the author has said this. So it calls for an urgent study of this variant, which is called P1. Since greater transmissibility and pathogenicity thank you, can drive even well prepared health systems to collapse. And so that's the fear. Just like what happened here in California, they were saying all the beds were filled up to capacity. People couldn't get regular appointments for regular checkups and things that they might have been concerned about because there were so many patients or people that had been infected. And so that's what they're fearing, that, and it can make your health um, um, hospitals collapse. Basically, a hospital system collapse. So to avoid infection, new CPR technique adds distance to avoid coronavirus infection during cardiopulmonary, or CPR rather. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, medical professionals can increase their distance from the patient. So this is hard. Can you imagine doing CPR, but you gotta increase your distance by doing chest compressions using an unshouldered heel and foot, um, known as the leg heel compression. So this is something new instead of their hands. So this is wow. This is new. A new study suggests so researchers had 20 medical professionals perform standard manual chest compression followed by leg and heel chest compression. So you got to do it with your leg and heel after a brief instruction on the mannequins. Okay, and so this is something that's going to be added, I guess, now because of what's been going on. And since they're going to have like healthcare professionals do it, they're probably going to have other people doing some of this. I don't know if this is going to be optional, but there was no difference in any of the variables measured, including correct placement of the heel for the purpose of compressions, correct depth of the chest compressions, and compression rate. So the study found potential spread of breath droplets from the patient to the person performing CPR would likely be minimized. So my question is, since we're talking about CPR, a lot of people that are professionals have to have a CPR card, and they have to be renewed every year or every 2, 3 years or whatever. So if this is the case, do they have to learn these techniques? And also, now that we have this COVID, how are you going to go and get these classes? I would believe you'd have to do these classes online now because of fear that you might catch, like they said, droplets in the water. You're doing one-on-one classes with people, and so they're touching mannequins, they're putting their mouth on mannequins, they're, even though they're using like some kind of shield, they're still touching it, and your saliva is getting your breathing. People are talking. Like there's a mandate when they open the theme parks, which I think is going to be extremely hard to get on a roller coaster. If you're going to ride the roller coaster, you can't scream, because if you open your mouth, you could spread. If you're screaming and more people are screaming, they could spread germs and spread COVID. So that's going to be a thing. And having that happen is going to be something. I want to see how that's going to work out. But anyway, it goes on to say that the study found potential spread in the droplets from people person to person performing CPR. And it says that it would likely be minimized if you do the leg and heel compressions. So, under special circumstances, COVID-19 pandemic leg and heel compression may be an effective alternative compared to manual chest compressions, while markedly increasing the distance to the patient, the research concluded in paper posted on Monday. MedRIV, okay, ahead of a peer review. And so that's probably going to be something new that's going to be going out pretty soon on all of the the CPR classes. That was something I didn't really know about. But yeah, so this is pretty much what's going to happen, they claim. And so that's why I was thinking, here we are, people are getting excited here in California because they're trying to do some opening of businesses. I heard they were opening theaters, theme parks, but everything is not completely fully reopening. It's just sort of reopening. You get what I'm saying? It's like sort of reopening, where there's, like, just today I went to the bank, and going to the bank, they had somebody check your temperature at the door. Um, and then they have this where you scan your phone, and then you have to answer the questions. They go through the questions, the screening for COVID. Have you traveled outside of the country? Have you been around somebody that is sick? Are you sick? Do you experience any symptoms? Blah blah blah. And you answer all those questions. This is before you can even get inside the bank. So that's how I know. Don't let this, oh, we're opening back up, fool you. The reason why they're opening some of these places and trying to open schools, and the schools aren't completely open, they're semi-open. Some stuff is semi-open because this whole pressure to get Gavin Newsom out of office because they don't want him in office anymore. That's what this is about, this reopening business. And because now they know that the money, the stimulus has been released. See, these are temporary fixes. Now watch when the money runs out, when people start realizing there's still a wave of evictions, that's going to still happen because, mind you, a lot of people who are on unemployment, that's going to eventually run out. And if you can't find a job, and if your job cuts you off again, or that you're not making enough money again, or something happens where they put you back on lockdown, you're going to see this stuff all over again. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is the truth. And so Gavin Newsom, even if he's there or not, this is going to happen. Now, I saw on the news today, they were talking about Gavin Newsom and how he was in this restaurant. It was a real respectable, I guess, a high-end restaurant, and there were other officials in there. And I believe I wouldn't be surprised if some of that was a setup. And why is it that the person that took the photos at the opportune time knew where the restaurant was? That had to either be somebody on the inside or it was set up that way. How do you know that he's out there doing that? And then here's the other thing. He should not have not wore a mask and been in this restaurant. But what was he in there for? Why were they in there? And who were all these other people? I believe they were also supposed to be involved in government, or they were some other likeness of Gavin Newsom, like other officials, people in other departments and what have you. So now, let me be clear here. Most of the people that I've seen, and I'll be honest, that have this issue with masks seem to be the people, if unlike, this is aside from the ones that have health issues, maybe they have breathing issues, wearing a mask, it doesn't work out for them, they need to wear a different type of mask, or there's other issues going on. Aside from these people who either they don't believe this virus, you still got people like that, and you've got these right-wing extremists, you have the Proud Boys, the 3%ers, and then you have these QAnon people, and then you have these people who are, it's not about the lockdowns, they don't like any Democrats. It doesn't matter who it is, they don't want Democrats in there. They want to try to strip all the Democrats out of those seats so they can put Republican pundits in there. They want to put Republicans in there because they're still mad about that election. And so we saw what happened January 6th when they had an insurrection at the Capitol building. Only 2 people were held accountable for shooting shooting bear spray at one of the security guards or law enforcement there. And so, which was federal. Now, it was a sea of white people. Let's be honest here. Mind you, a lot of them, I didn't see any of them crying about, oh, I'm about to be evicted from my apartment. These people have houses, they had good jobs. Some of them even came up there with their logo of their job, of their business, and they weren't afraid to show who they were. They wanted to fight for their businesses to stay open because they don't want to lose their millions or whatever of dollars that they make, or thousands and thousands of dollars, which could amount to millions. So these are the people that we're looking at here that are doing most of the complaining. They were complaining earlier on when they first did the lockdowns, when it was a lot of death and a lot of people were it was highly contagious, which it still is. It hasn't taken away from this pandemic. Technically, still is not over with. They're just trying to appease these people because these people been crying and bitching and moaning about their businesses being closed, and they don't want to stay set up. This is the second time we set up our outdoor dining and they closed it. They said they weren't making as much money with the takeout as they do when people come to their restaurants. And so some of these business owners don't just own one restaurant, they own several restaurants. And so some of them were complaining, oh, if we're not able to pay for, I didn't really hear so much of that. Some smaller business owners were the ones that were more in trouble than the bigger business owners. These bigger business owners hated to see that Trump didn't get picked, that he was not the one that became the president for another 4 years. So they kept making waves about that. And so that's who you saw that went to Washington. They stormed the Capitol, and they were selling out on the guns. They were buying guns, and they're usually real bad people that can't buy guns. They're not in the gun shop buying guns because they can't pass a background check. The people who are buying guns are the ones you see that are bitching and moaning. Some of the ones that are buying these guns that do all this crazy stuff at the Capitol building, they're not even using guns anymore. They had guns with them, but they're using bear spray. They were at the Capitol building, and they were the ones on January 6th that did the insurrection. So that's the reason why you see that happen. That's what happened. That's the reason why Gavin Newsom now, he's trying to open up stuff partially because there's so many signatures. They had to get a number of signatures, enough so that they could recall him and basically move him out of office. So that's what's happening right now. So it is fueled by these people. It is. And some people say, oh, no, it's not. It's some Democrats want him out of there too because of the lockdowns. Let me tell you something. Some of it's a mixed bag. You have some people that are part of religions. California, Gavin Newsom readies for a recall election fueled by backlash to pandemic restrictions. That's where this came from. That's where most of this came from. And that you can't say that's not where it came from. That is where it came from. And people want him out of there because some of these people are not just people that were saying, oh, we really need our jobs. These are not like neighborhood people that are worried about getting evicted from their apartment. These are not people that are worried that they don't have enough food to feed their kids because they're, that little job that they're essential workers. You know who essential workers really are? The ones that they barely have enough money to feed their kids and pay rent. And their rent burden, and they're usually people who are marginalized individuals that have no other alternative, and they can't just sit behind a computer and work from home. They can't have their little restaurant open so they can do takeout. Those are not those people. The essential workers are the people you see that are working behind the cash register. They don't own a business. Those are the people that they live in an apartment. They can barely pay rent to feed their kids and make it for the next month's rent. Those are the ones who are the real essential workers. This lady's on TV talking about, oh, they get to pick and choose who's the essential workers. No, you have essential workers working for you, lady. That's what you have. You're not the essential worker. You're the business owner who if you can get a PPP loan, You can get a PPP loan and hold out for a little longer than somebody who, if they don't pay rent in another couple of weeks, they gotta be looking for the door. That ain't you. And so the smaller business owners are the ones that you could say they're really struggling because they may not have as they may not qualify for certain things. And they are actually more the ones that need the PPP loans. They need the loans, but the loans, they got to pay them back. And it's risky business because you're not getting grant money, you're getting a loan, mind you. So that means that it's the anticipation that your business is going to be open and that you're going to be able to pay that loan back at some point. So you need help. If it isn't grant money, they're expecting you to pay that money back. And so but here you see these big business owners are somehow they're sliding through the cracks and getting PPP loans when they don't really need them, they don't deserve them. Didn't we see that earlier on in the pandemic where big businesses were getting loans when they already had a lot of money? They had a lot that they could just kind of like weather the storm versus other small business owners that couldn't really do it. They're open today, tomorrow the whole chain is closed, and it may not, be open ever again. We see that, but some of these other people who are having a lot more weekly are the ones you see that are bitching and moaning about, we need to get rid of Gavin Newsom because you put us on lockdown, and then we have all this death around us, all these
We
people
are
that
not
died,
about
yet we
to
have
get into
people out
victim
there
blaming,
that claim
victim
they want to get rid
shaming
of Gavin
here.
Newsom.
As far as we know,
And
in
they're
Atlanta,
basically
we not
walking
had
around. These are the
any
same ones.
calls,
We have a
911 calls
spread
from
of a
that
deadly
location. I believe
virus.
one
We heard
minor
all the
call
variants and stuff
on
that are
someone
spreading. These
stealing
are the
some
same people.
keys.
They're going
So
to the
we don't
beach.
know additional
They're
information about
going
what
out
his
with
motives
no,
were, but
they
we
don't have
certainly will
masks
not
on either.
begin to
They're
blame
going to
victims.
these
And as
Trump
far as we
meetings
know, in
and Trump
Atlanta, these are
parties too.
legally
Nobody said
operating
anything about
businesses that have
that.
not
They're
been
going
on
to
our
the
radar, not
Capitol
on the
building
radar
and
of
they're
APD.
rallying together, and they don't have any masks on. They're basically they're fighting against people to say, oh well, you need to open things back up, and then if you don't pay them the money that they want, then they're crying, like big babies and stuff like that. They don't see the fact that here these people, they're unemployed, they're on unemployment. They don't have a business. They don't own 2 and 3 businesses. They don't have a house. These are the same people crying, oh, I had to sit at my pool, and we can't hire our nanny anymore because we gotta conserve our money. We gotta hold back on our nanny and hold back on our room service. The people that come and clean up our house and stuff. Poor people are not complaining about that stuff. We're complaining about having a place to live. Not who's gonna clean up our pool or who's gonna sweep our floor and stuff like that. And so see, that's the difference. That's who's doing this recall of Gavin Newsom, because they hate anybody that goes in there that's a Democrat. They hate them. That's what's going on. And you have Democrats. There are some Democrats that almost lean a little towards the Republican side. So don't get yourself mixed up in that, because a lot of people will say, oh, I'm a Democrat. But they're not really completely Democrat. They're sort of middle of the road. Just one foot in the Republican. So they kind of lean towards the other way. So they can say, well, I'm a Democrat. And we voted against Gavin Newsom. Yeah, that's because you think you have a little more lead than anyone, but because something didn't go your way, you're moaning about it. There are a lot of people that weren't happy with a lot of things, even he either opposed them or didn't oppose them. They were not happy about none of this. They had to be happy about the virus that's been making people depressed. Some people feel like they couldn't see their family. and stuff, it wasn't a fun thing. It was meant to protect people. It's not like it
I
can't
think that it's
happen again
important that
with
we
someone
first
else.
acknowledge the fact.
The only
I
difference
know that
is with
we've received
this
a number of
Texas
calls
governor,
about,
he's
is this a
opening
hate
everything
crime?
up.
We are
He's taking
still
away the
early in
masks.
this
He's taking away
investigation.
everything. He's
So we
opening it.
cannot make
Now
that
watch how
determination at
when
this
this
moment.
Italy
Again, we are
virus
very early in this
really just
investigation. Even
comes
though
through
we've made
there, and then
an
somebody
arrest,
gets on the plane, they
there's still a
travel, or
lot more work to
somehow
be
it
done.
makes its way to
And
Texas.
so,
What we're
with
going to
that being
see.
said, I would just wanted to make
What
sure
we're
that
going to see
I know
how
that that's
you're
going
going to
to be
see
a
the
concern,
numbers
and that
that
you were
drop, the
probably
numbers going to
asking that of
rise higher and
many of
higher
us.
again.
We are
And
just
lo and
not
behold,
there as of
if
yet.
it's there, it's going to come to the other states in the U.S. And you're going to see those numbers that were dipping, they're going to start creeping and kicking all the way back up again. And then they're going to say, what are you going to do? Leave everything open? Just tell people to wear masks? Wash their hands? You know, with all this death, now you got deadlier variants here. What are you going to do? Lock everything down again. That's what's going to happen.